All right, we got a pretty decent crowd here for Monday night. A lot of new faces, which I love to see, so it should be a pretty good one. We're gonna do something a little bit different today. Normally we go over one opening, particularly one variation, and we go really deep into it. But today, I'm gonna take a suggestion from one of our YouTube people that mentioned me, and they wrote a comment. And so for Dan Williams, who writes, can you guys do a video of the top 10 most common openings using E4 with a little synopsis of each, as well as the best possible defense for black to play versus each? That'd be great, thanks. So yeah, I think Dan, this was a great idea, and he really knew how to ingratiate himself to me when he posted in another tweet, another comment. I advertise your videos on my Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. So thanks, Dan, for sharing my stuff around, and thanks for the excellent idea. So tonight we're gonna do a top 10 video, and it's gonna be the top 10 most common responses to the move E4. Now this could be interpreted a couple different ways. I could do a video that's mostly all Sicilians and Ruy Lopez's, and that sort of a thing. But I'm going to take this position here, and we're gonna look at the top 10 moves that black can play from this position. Who can tell me how many legal moves black has? Yeah, 20, right. So the pawns each have 2 moves, so that's 16, and then there's 2 knight moves each, makes 20. So we're gonna go over half of the possible moves that black can play. And I used a database of 4 million games to prepare this. And just so you know, the top 10 moves account for 98 or 99.8% of all the total openings. So there's only about 5,000 games where they didn't play something that you're gonna see tonight. And I apologize in advance if some of the openings I have to go kind of quick. Normally we go deep into opening. We're going wide tonight. We're gonna try to cover a whole lot in a little bit of time here. So, all right, starting out with number 10, we have the Owen's Defense. Now this has been played in the database that's here on this computer 12,000 times, which is 0.3% of all E4 games. So you're not gonna see this very often, but you don't wanna be surprised when you do see it. And you know, I've seen a lot of my students, they always ask, you know, I gotta know so much when I play E4. Well, yeah, you gotta know something like this. Sometimes your opponent might surprise you. And typically when I have played this, I play it against lower rated players. When I play people under 1200, I play this and sometimes you win quickly. So we'll go over it. So the most natural move is just to take the center. When they let you take it, you take it. And bishop b7. And this is black's point. We'll draw with our fancy new arrows. You know, see the gradient? Okay, we're already attacking the pawn. It's a very interesting approach. And so white should defend it, and there's different ways to do so. The big question is what's going to happen with this knight here. Is it going to go to c3? Is it going to go to d2? Both of these are very common. And another question is, what's to become of this pawn? Is he going to support the center? Is he going to go to c4? And so there's different ideas in each. And of all the openings we're going to cover tonight, this one is sort of the dodgiest. It has the worst reputation, and having played it against decent people, I mean, white has several ways to get a pleasant advantage in this line, which is why it's not so popular. Now, most often, what black's plan is, if white ever does adopt a setup with knight to c3, is he's going to play e6, and the bishop's going to go pin the knight, and usually it'll end up taking and doubling the pawns. It's all in an effort to take control over the e4 square. So these lines are very playable, but the most common move is actually bishop to d3, not moving the knight just yet, not allowing a future pin. So, okay, black has the main move, which is e6. It's worth looking briefly at the crazy move f5, which shouldn't be very good, but lines get very, very complicated. Here, white has sort of the amazing move. Looks like, you know, black is going to go take that pawn. That's his point. There's a pin here. But the most critical line is actually to accept this. So what's going on? We take the pawn. We're going to win your rook. And I've had people ask, you know, why do you have that rule, don't move your f-pawn? Well, a lot of the times, either people, they put a pawn where their knight can go, so then their knight can't go there. That's one reason you don't want to move an f-pawn. But in this case, too, you always want to be on the lookout for the queen check on this long diagonal. And here, that's the best move. So black's move is totally forced. You only got one move. And all right, now white can take it. Now there's a famous Greco game. He played it in 1620 against No Name, and his opponent played here, thinking he's very cunning. He's, all right, now you're gonna move your queen, and I'm not gonna get checkmated. But white has a very nice tactic here. Who can see what white played in this position? G7 check. Is that your move?
Yeah, but yeah, I'm second guessing myself.
Okay. So this. All right.
The idea of just promoting again on H8, right? But
okay. So yeah, this seems right, but you actually have a better pawn move. You can take this thing. So check. Black's move is forced, and okay, checkmate. Yeah, and the other line, when you just push, I still have control over G6. So yeah, you got to take the pawn. Okay, and that's why in this position, after these forced moves, the way black can continue is with bishop to G7. And now after this check, the king will have to move. And you can take the knight with check. Perhaps knight to F3 is even a stronger move. And you get really crazy scenarios. You know, white already has this pawn way down here and an opening. Of course, he's losing the rook here in the corner. And all right, that's an interesting line to know about. But we're gonna look at the main line here, which is the move E6. So again, if you play knight C3, we're gonna pin it. And so we develop our other knight. We're not telling you where this guy's going just yet. And at some point, black has to attack the center. So now's a decent time. And the pleasure of playing this position is even as white, you can go ahead and castle here if you want to play a Sicilian type structure. This is perfectly playable for white, and in these lines, white gets pretty good game. But more common is C3, just protecting the center. Now, black will develop. And it's important also in this opening for white to time his move E5. He doesn't necessarily want to do it too early and give the knight access to D5. So typically here, he will protect his pawn. Black will develop. It's worth knowing this little trick, I guess. Knight to C6 is already a big inaccuracy, because after D5, black is in a lot of trouble due to the pin on this file here, the fact that there will be discovered checks. So this would be just losing. And if you have to move your knight, and I get to play a move like C4, then this guy is looking pretty silly. This guy is out of play. And white has a big space advantage and a very nice position. So this already would be quite bad for black. Black has to be quite accurate in these lines just to survive the opening here. OK, so we castle. Now they can play it now that there's a piece blocking on the E file. Now if you play D5, we can just take it. So A3. Black is also threatening in this position to take, let's waste a move, to take here on D4 and play knight to B4. And if he picks up this bishop, then he's doing very well. It's a strategical success. He gets to pick up the bishop pair, which explains the move A3. And OK, now black plays sort of an interesting move. He puts the knight on the side. And there's a tactical basis for this that's coming up on the next move. Black really wants to plop this knight in here, that harass the rook. Maybe he'll get to take one of the bishops. So you got to defend the B3 square. So that's what happens. Ben Simon is looking at his watch. At some point, our cameraman is going to leave, and then who knows what's going to happen tonight. So I should be what?
You should have 3 done right now.
I should have 3 done already? Is that true? Oh my, yeah, we're in a lot of trouble tonight. And Ben's leaving. It's all going to fall apart, I can just tell. OK, so white defended the B3 square, and we'll go a little farther. Here's the tactical point. The move C4. And OK, wait a minute, what's going on? We got 2 pieces attacking C4. But there's 3? Yeah. All right, you can count a little bit better than me. OK, but if you take here, the point is we're removing the defender of the E pawn. So here you'd be able to grab this guy, and black frees himself a little bit. So OK, you want to keep your bishop, so you move it. And all right, we still haven't committed to a plan. The most flexible move here, queen C7. White continues. All right, what's up, Danny Machuca? You know this position, Danny? Is this position you've been talking about?
Yeah.
OK, and there's also a question now, which way will black castle? All right, let's suppose he goes king side. And it's time for white to come up with a plan. And an interesting little move, we'll stop after this move. He's making sure that if his bishop ever moves or his knight has to move, that this move isn't coming with a gain of tempo. And white is slightly better here. He's going to maneuver his knight around. He's going to go try to attack the black king. He might play h4, h5, try to provoke some weaknesses. And at the right moment, he's going to play e5 and get this bishop going. So there we go. I think Ben Simon's out of here. So who knows what's going to happen. But all right, that's a brief introduction to the Owen's defense. Now coming in at number 9, let's reverse a little bit. Coming in at number 9, we have the Nimzowitsch Defence, which is the move knight to c6. And I think out of all of them, this one is sort of the most underrated. Black can get sort of a decent position. It's not as suspicious as it might look. You know, why would you put that knight in front of your pawn? What does that move even accomplish? And the most testing move is to play d4. That seems like the most natural. But you might be surprised to learn knight f3 is actually the most common move here. And I think people pick this more for practical reasons than an attempt to outright refute black's play. Now, they're probably ready for this if they're an e4 player. This would just transpose into a king's pawn game. d5 is also possible. You'll get sort of a Scandinavian type position. More to keep just with the Nimzowitsch defense if you want to keep it outside the realm of any other openings. You don't want to transpose to anything. You can play the move d6. But we're going to focus on the critical move here, d4. And there's two moves that black likes to play in these positions, either d5 or e5. If e5, we can now transpose to a scotch, which is why a lot of black players might not want to play this way. They're trying to get their opponent out of book, so e5 is not as common. But even after this, we can kick the knight around, and it can retreat either way. It can actually go to b8, but let's go to e7. And black intends just to bring his knight out. We won't go too deep into this, but this is the most common move, not the only move. And black will get his bishop out. If there's a knight here on c3, he's going to pin it, and often he's going to take it. And this knight's going to go here, and he's going to get his pieces out, and it'll be kind of a slow maneuvering game. So this is interesting, but more keeping in the theme of the opening is d5. OK, most common is to push. And now black gets his bishop outside of the pawn chain before he plays the move e6. And if you know of the French Guimard, you'll notice this looks quite a lot like that variation in the advanced French, which I've been known to play from time to time. The big downside in black's position here is this knight. In this structure, he's going to want to play the move c5. But now there's a knight in the way. On the other hand, unlike most French advances, you got this bishop out. If you put your pawn on e6 on move 1, normally you don't get to put your bishop out on f5. So we get quite an interesting position. Okay, bishop d3 right now immediately drops a pawn. Knight takes d4 does work for black. So most often they protect it. f6 is an interesting move here, but e6 is typical. And all right, we'll get a position here where, all right, not the only move. Very similar to the Guimard, and we'll stop here for brevity's sake. All right, coming in at number 8. Yeah, let's do this first. Coming in at number 8, we have Alekhine's defense, or Alekhine's defense. Okay, this has been played 92,000 times, and which is about 2.29% of the time. So not the most common, but very provocative. He's encouraging white to advance the pawn and attack his knight. So what's going to happen here? So white will normally push. The only other move worthy of any theoretical discussion is knight to c3. But OK, we'll push. We'll play the critical line. And now there's quite a lot of ways white can play. He can move all of his pawns, the 4 pawns attack. He can develop very modestly. A lot of different lines. And so d4 is just the most logical. You're just taking control of the center with your pawns. Also possible is c4, as in the famous game Nakamura Schrantz from 2011. Do you know that game? Yeah, all right.
I think maybe should be.
Yeah. OK, so that's interesting. But we're going to focus here on d4. And black's point, why did he do this? Why did he force white to make all these pawn moves? Maybe he wanted to. he's going to try to argue that this pawn has been overextended. So after a move like d6, attacking the center, white needs to make a choice. He can simply develop his knight. That's fine, and we'll look at that in a second. Or he can decide to play the move c4. And after we retreat, either the exchange variation, which is interesting. OK, black can take either way. So OK, this is just possible for time. Let's look at the 4 pawns attack here. And all right, this is quite an attempt to blow black off the board. And if you look in the databases, there's some short games in this position, because if black isn't careful, he can get crushed right away. He does have his chances here. He can take in the center and play knight to c6. And we'll see how crazy some of these lines get. Now you can't play d5 because your e-pawn would be hanging. And you need to be careful how you defend your d-pawn. If you just defend with the knight casually, this will run right into bishop g4, attacking one of the pieces that's protecting the square. And we'll probably take it next. And some care should be taken here. White should consider the move bishop to e3. And if I'm going fast, and you can pause your videos at home if at any point you wanna think about that position for yourself. OK, so now black's going to get his bishop out. He's going to play e6. And OK, we'll develop some pieces. Black will develop. And now white's point of this is he gets to play in the center. So d5, trying to crush black before he gets castled. Now knight b4 immediately is a move. More common is taking. And all right, so black is now getting ready to jump into c2. But white is just in time with the move knight to d4, protecting d2 and attacking the bishop. So black's got to be really careful here. If you just casually go back, it's actually a big disaster after this check. Not a big disaster, but you have to move your king, which is not what you want to be doing. So much more common is they drop back, and he's about to castle, but we can get the move e6 in. OK, and after the trades, what's going on here? So white has a really strong pawn. It'll probably be weak if black makes it to the endgame. We can take this bishop whenever we want. And all right, so we got to be pretty careful here as both colors. Now, queen g4. And OK, I'm going to go take this pawn. And black's move, you might not find if you haven't seen this before, but he has a decent move with this big check here. And white will lose a little bit of material. Yeah, now the rook is hanging. And so, OK, we reach a position like this where you're going to win material, but white has great attacking chances. Now, even better than taking the bishop is to castle. I don't really have time to demonstrate it, but knight to f5 is actually a really uncomfortable threat for black to meet. So it's surprisingly annoying how strong that move is. So he probably gets his queen out, and we take the bishop. And you get such a position. I don't think we'll go much farther than that. And this is the 4 pawns attack, a very crazy way for white to play. He's trying to blow black off the board. And black should be careful. And I've played the Alekhine a lot. It used to be one of my favorite openings. So I never really minded the 4 pawns attack. I always found it a little bit more annoying when they just played normal, solid moves and didn't do very much. So in the main line, they pin the knight here in an effort to take the knight, because this is actually quite a nice piece. It'll usually end up going to e5. You don't have to play this way. You can play such a line and play c6. And Carlsen has played this half a dozen times with good results. So that's the way I used to play it, but we'll go over the main line. All right. And white's just playing normal moves. He'll play c4 later after he castles. E6 castles. And only now will white decide it's about time for him to move some of these pieces. So he probably doesn't want to put the knight in front of his pawn. He takes the opportunity to chase the knight away. And OK, we get such a position. And things can get really problematic for black. It's all theory still. But after we develop a few more pieces, the main move here is d5. So what should white do? It's very interesting. He gets the move c5 in. And now the knight is going to have to move. But before he does that, black usually tosses in this move, which is questionable if this helps black or not. The point is, if you take back with the bishop, which is possible, I could do that, you're given control over c4, and that's where the knight's going to jump in. And while that is playable, it's probably in black's interest to open the g file. At some point, he might be able to put a rook there and get an attack on the king. And also, he's going to play like f4, f5 at the right moment. He's thinking about checkmate, and he has much more space. So I don't play this line because it looks great for white. All right, and now an interesting scenario. The Alekhine knight joins his buddy over there, and you don't often see two knights just sitting right next to each other. So a very interesting position. And white can play on both sides of the board. I think this is just a lot of fun for white, personally. A cute little move here, b4. Point is, if you take it, I play rook b1, and then I'm going to go attack your b pawn. And all right, without saying too much more, you can see that this, why this is a very provocative opening. You're tempting white to get the big center. And sometimes they hit the center, you don't get to fight for it enough, and you get crushed. But sometimes they overextend, and that's what you're hoping to do when they play the Alekhine. All right, coming in at number 7, we have the modern defense. This has been played over 100,000 times, which is 2.65% of all E4 games. Still very small numbers, but very relevant. Okay, there's some people that like to just play g6 against anything, and so this is the opening that they'll play. Of course, most critical is just grabbing the center, and all right, we develop our bishop. Now there's different lines that can occur here. When you don't contest the center directly, usually you're giving your opponents a lot more time to choose whatever setup they want. So there's quite a lot of ways white can play here. We won't have time to go over everything. We'll just go over one line. Normally they'll develop their knight. They're not committing yet to having a knight on f3 because they might play the move f4 themselves. And this is very similar to the Pirc defense, which we'll come to in a bit. But the difference is in the Pirc, they've already put their knight on f6, and you're using pieces to control the center. So of all the ways white can try to take advantage of this is, okay, one of these moves. And black can play knight f6. We'll transpose into a Pirc, and we'll get a similar game that we'll see later. But okay, you can try to play some different move, a6. And what's he doing? Why is he playing on the side? Well, okay, he's going to play b5. He's not going to castle right away. He's mostly waiting to see what white will do. It's kind of a waiting game. White, how are you going to defend? And then I'll tell you how I'm going to set up all my pieces. So a very interesting way to play. It's, it's not for everybody, but it's quite interesting. And all right. And now white can castle queenside, and then black will know where the king is, and he might be able to get an attack. So, okay. White's plan is kind of simple. He's going to play over here on the king side for a bit. He'll castle when he feels like it's safe enough. Eventually, black has to start developing pieces. So, okay, he plays for c5 here. And here we go, h4. And the most common move here is not to let white go and open the position at all. It's to play h5. And black will probably castle in the distant future. Okay. This move does allow the knight to jump into a pretty nice square. When you played the move h5, you gave away the g5 square a little bit. So we'll develop some pieces. And we don't have a whole lot of time, so we'll I know I'm zooming through it a little bit. But all right, he's really going to play c5. And okay, and you get such a position, and I think this is fine to leave it here. We can see black is sort of doing a wait and see approach. How are you going to develop your pieces? And when you are castled, you might see an attack. Whose king is safer here? That's sort of the debate that's going on. Is the white king safer? Is the black king safer? So all in all, it's kind of an interesting approach. Not very, very popular, of course, but okay, it's quite interesting. All right, coming in at number 6, we have the Scandinavian Defence, which has been played 147,000 times, and we're up to 3.6% of all games are the Scandinavian. And we've covered this before on this channel, so okay, we'll see it one more time. The critical line is to take. Knight f6 is possible, but almost always they take with the queen. And you don't have to play knights to c3. You can try to play lines where you wait to see if you can get your c pawn and d pawn going, and then put your knight on c3 after you've already played c4. But this is critical, and we've examined in a very recent video that there's 4 moves here. d6 has been a favorite of Tivyakov. That's very popular. d8, the banker variation. That's also interesting. Carlsen has played it. And the Mike Kummer variation. I mean, the Patzer variation. So, okay. Queen a6, or queen a5, sorry. And white puts a pawn in the center. This is the most common way for black to play. and we'll get our pieces out. White's big thing is at some point he's going to be trying to play the move d5 when black sets up his pawns here. So knight f3, not only the most natural, but often he wants this knight to go to e5 pretty early in the game. That sort of thing can happen a lot. And this move is integral to black's plan. At some point, white's going to put a bishop here, and then he's going to move the knight away, and it's going to be a discovered attack. So black makes way for his queen to escape in the future. Also, the pawn is taking control over d5, which is in his best interest. So, all right, we'll see. White continues to fight for d5. Black should get his bishop out before he plays the move e6. And all right, so we're setting up for it. We don't need to fear it immediately. And if you'll remember my Scandinavian video, I told you, what's that? Oh, sorry. I told in my Scandinavian video, in order for this knight move to be really effective, if you want to have a good discovered attack, you need 3 key ingredients. One is the bishop needs to be protected. Otherwise, whenever sometimes when you're playing for d5, the queen might get the c5 square. Okay, but and the black king should be in the center, and you should have the knight that can move away with the bishop here. Okay, so we've protected the bishop. If you're asking, do you just drop a pawn? You can go watch the video to see what happens if you do indeed accept the sacrifice here. It's not very good. The move d5 is very strong. So this is the only really move that black can play that achieves something with his move here. He has to be worried about some discovered attacks. Anything else, white has some good knight moves. All right, we castle. And we'll see in such positions, this is sort of the main line. It's not the only line that we covered in the other video, but it's worth seeing. White gets the 2 bishops. So why would black play this way? Well, all right, we'll go a few more moves just so we can discuss the plan. This is sort of the typical position. We want to keep our 2 bishops. And why would you give the 2 bishops? Well, black has sort of a plan. White typically is going to be playing on the king side over here. And what he's going to get in return for the bishops is he's going to go open up the h-file, make this rook a good piece. A very typical maneuver is to get the queen to c5 with a nice pin here on the c-file. And black will argue, okay, I have some really nice activity. And in exchange, white has a little bit more space. He has the 2 bishops. And it's a pretty even game. So, all right, very nice. All right, coming in at number 5, we have the Pirc defense, which is very similar to the modern defense. And we'll take a look. Again, when you can take the center, you can do it. So far, we've seen in most of these openings, black is just giving white the center, and that's why they're not as popular. But here, instead of playing a move like g6 and not telling you where the knight's going to go, knight f6. All right, attacking the pawn. White will typically defend it. And there's so many possible moves here for white. If you get a book about the Pircs, it's going to be 400 to 500 pages long because there's so many possible ways white can set up his pieces here. We'll go over the most aggressive and one of the most common, the Austrian attack. And okay, white is intending, I'm going to play e5 at some point. I'm going to crush you in the center. What are you going to do? So let's develop a few more pieces. And now there's a big branch here. There's massive theory for the move c5. There's massive theory for castles. Castling is a little bit more popular. And here white has a ton of moves. Historically, the most popular is bishop to d3. Bishop to e3 is also a very nice move. It's preventing c5 at least for the moment. And later, he might connect his bishop and queen and eventually try to trade off the bishops here. But I couldn't help but show one of my favorite games because there's a really beautiful line. So this is the one time in the lecture I'm not going to go over the main line here. I want to show you the move e5. And there was a game that Nakamura played with the white pieces, and he just crushed his opponent in a very, very beautiful variation. So I feel I must show you. You could take on e5, but okay, his opponent decided to retreat. And h4. So white is really serious about this attack. Black should, take some sort of action in the center, and white continues h5. Black takes. And now the most exciting move. And this is why I've decided to show it. You can actually take here on g6, sacrificing a piece. So this is one of the wildest variations that you can get here in chess. So I just have to show you. Okay, we take, and what's going on here? Why did we give up a piece? White needs to get a strong attack here. He's got his bishop. He's got some knights that are coming in. We got the rook here. So you can start to see, you know, he's got some really serious attackers coming in, and he's going to go try to checkmate black. So bishop to c4, and his opponent played knight to f8. A little more common is e6 with the tactical point that if I take this, what does black play? All right, you can pause your videos at home, see if you can find it. But the move black can play here is knight to e5. So the point is if you take this rook, we can take back. And this should be pretty good for black. He traded some defenders here. It's going to be very similar to the game. White just simply won't take. He'll play knight to g5. And so we'll see that in this position. So we got a very similar situation. And after the capture, black made sort of an interesting move here. He took this b pawn, which is tricky, but it's probably not the best move for him. Because now most people will take the knight. This is a known position. But this is the first time and only time somebody's done this. But now white has an extra attacker. So, you know, white's pretty serious about this attack. And we'll see that happen. So check. No big deal. We'll move our king. And now at some point you got to take this. And okay, how is white going to finish his attack here? What can he do? Well, you can bring the queen in. A very good start. And now the key square he's going to attack here is h7. It's unfortunate that this knight is here. It's kind of a pesky knight. But okay, bishop d3. We're taking aim at h7. So we're going to go try to checkmate you. All right, in the game, he attacked the bishop. So it was defended. And black tries for one more little trick. He has a little plan here. He's going to try to put his bishop over here on b5, try to trade off one of those key attacking players. So a very nice move from Hikaru, c4, preventing black's idea. And all right, the queen's coming in. He's got to be kind of pesky here. He's thinking about grabbing one of these pawns with check. All right, what's going to happen? Well, now we can take, and after the trade, black here played the absolute losing move. He's in pretty bad shape in this position. But after this, white made one more move, and black resigned. And it's kind of a quiet move. Rook to h4. Not only defending the pawn, but black is sort of powerless against the move rook to g4. And you're just in a lot of trouble here. You can't get the bishop out of the way or protect it again. If your king was here instead, maybe you could play knight to c6 and protect the bishop with your rook. But yeah, so king to f8 didn't really work for him. And all right, he saw it and he said, all right, I give it up. So a very interesting and very aggressive way to play. And that's what happens when you don't contest the center from the beginning. Your opponent can, get a huge center and they can try to crush you really quickly. Okay, coming in at number 4, we got the Caro-Kann. And now we're getting into much more typical openings. We're starting to get some big numbers here. It's been played 287,000 times, or 7% of all the E4 games. And it begins with the move c6. Now we've covered this before, so we're going to take another look at it. And this is black's point. He didn't contest the center on move 1. He waits until move 2, and then he strikes in the center. So white has a couple options here. He can play the exchange, boo. He can play the advanced, which is a very serious consideration right now at the top level. It's one of white's best tries for an advantage. Or you can play either knight move. And usually they'll transpose if black decides to take on e4. Okay, we take back. And here there's actually 3 moves. We've covered the classical before. We'll take one more look at it. But it's also possible to play a move like knight f6. And in this position we can take. And whichever way you take back, black is going to say, I'm going to get some pretty dynamic activity for my piece here. This is the Bronstein-Larsen variation. He's going to try to use this, and it's a very interesting variation, but it's not for today. The Steinitz variation also is interesting. Karpov used this over 100 times in his career. And okay, you're just going to play knight f6, and that way if you trade, I don't have to weaken my pawn structure. But most common, the classical variation, you attack the knight, and you got your bishop outside of the pawn chain. So now when you play e6, you'll be looking good. All right, so we harass the bishop. And the one feature that does stick out in black's position is this bishop. White can continue to try to get it. h4, threatening to trap the bishop. So you got to make some space. And the most accurate move here is not h5. It's knight f3. The reason is if you play any move other than knight to d7, I'm jumping into e5, which is usually pretty annoying, especially when I can reinforce it with an f-pawn. So knight to d7. All right, now we attack the bishop. It has to go back. Bishop d3. So this is a, this bishop is quite annoying. That's a good bishop over there. So white endeavors to trade it off. And black should take. Otherwise, they can get the Danny Machuca rook, right? This happened to you. This is what happened in your game with Jonathan Israel?
Yeah.
And you got the... It was, it was a different opening, but yeah. Yeah, you don't want the Machuca rook. It's not the best rook. So, all right, he took on d3. And knight f6 and e6 are usually the same deal. And I recommended the move bishop to d2 in my previous video. Historically more popular is bishop to f4. And okay, this is obviously the more active square for the bishop. But now black has sort of a pesky little move, queen to a5 check. The point is you're probably going to drop your bishop back. White doesn't want to play a move like c3 because he's going to castle over on the queen side, and he doesn't want to weaken the position. So white will drop back. And so the queen got to c7. And we'll just go a few more moves. We'll develop some pieces. And all right. So now what to do? Typically in these positions, we're going to try to get out of the way here so we can move our g-pawn. It seems kind of strange if you want to trade pieces here, but you got to get out of the way of the g-pawn. And we looked at games where black castled on the king side, but we'll have a stop here. And this is a very interesting position, and yeah, it's been covered before. Coming in at number 3 is a personal favorite of mine, the French defense, which has been played in more than 500,000 games, and the numbers are starting to get big here. It's been in 12.99% of all E4 games, so almost 13%. And so this is the French. Again, the most critical is to play d4, and similar to the Caro-Kann, we strike in the center. So here there are 4 moves. You can play the exchange, boo. You can play the advance, which it's quite a lot different than the Caro-Kann, or you can play the tirage or the classical way. So very similar to the Caro-Kann in that way. Okay, but knight c3 is the main move. My preferred move here is just the most natural. I put my knight on f6. But more popular and more aggressive is the move bishop to b4. So what is this? Why would you develop your bishop before your knight? Doesn't that break one of the big rules? And what are you going to do? Give away your dark squared bishop? Often in the French, you need your bishop over by your king for defense. So we're going to get some pretty exciting games here. The exchange is possible. Also possible here is this gambit, though it's a bit dubious. The most common move here is e5. And okay, so the big break that you want to get in when you're black in the French is c5, so you can play it here. And there's many, many variations. This is a pretty deep theory now that we're getting into. But a3 is the most common, trying to get the bishop pair. Now, black almost always takes the knight. If you go back, white actually has a cute little move, b4 exclam. So he's trying to temporarily block this diagonal so that he can jump his knight in and try to go harass the king. So that's why in this position, black will almost always take this knight. And we take back. Okay, there's more than one line here. We'll develop our knight, and there's a lot of moves. The most critical is going and harassing the king. So you can castle here. You'll notice that bishop to h6 is not a threat because you can block without having to give up your rook. So yeah, I saw one person that thought he couldn't play this because of this move, but okay. So castling is, almost tied for as most popular as the more interesting variation, which is queen to c7, the poison pawn variation. So if you don't take the pawn, why'd you put your queen on g4? And all right, so white grabs the pawn, attacks the rook better move, and I'll take that pawn too. So here we're going to get something pretty crazy. There's a lot of stuff going on. Why do we give up a pawn? Black's going to hope for some really active play, and we'll see. Immediately, he can cause some problems in the center, and he has a big threat. Let's not take this, because then what does black play? Yeah. Yeah, queen c3, forking the king and rook. So care must be taken. It's interesting. So, I mean, knight e2 is the most popular move here. It's funny to mention that king to d1 is also a move. And it's one of my favorite bad moves to make, because I was playing a FIDE master, and in some, random position, I just played king to d1. And after the game, he said, "Why'd you play king d1?" I said, "I don't know." It was some position nobody would ever think about playing king d1. I just did it. So it's a bad move I like to play sometimes. Okay, knight e2 is the main line here. And it's known to be a bit too risky for black to grab this guy. He gets a good position either after a bishop to f4 or simply taking here on d4. He doesn't really want to go into an endgame based on the fact that, well, white has this passed pawn, so this is going to be coming. And you have a lot of weak dark squares. And so often this doesn't work. The knights and the fact that we have a dark squared bishop are really handy for white. So this position is quite good for white, which is why, okay, they attacked it again. We should defend the pawn. We don't want to give up our big central pawn here. And okay. Black gets ready to castle. He can also take on c3 first if he so desires. And typically we bring our queen back. Our queen wasn't really doing anything over there, so we bring it back to the center. And now we take. Okay, and now this position's been played several times, and both recaptures lead to different types of positions. But we'll leave it here with sort of a basic idea. Black's going to castle over here. He is down a pawn. What is he going to get for his pawn? Well, he's going to have some really nice squares for his knights, so he's counting on this active play. Now, I was playing a master once, and it was funny. We got a position like this, though he misplayed it, and I just did this, and then I just won. Like, he never stopped me, so it was really strange. I just ran my pawn and I made a queen, and then I won. So that was a strange way. So that h-pawn is typically part of white's plan. He's going to get moving really fast. A lot of the times, you might also consider putting the bishop on the diagonal here to cut off the rook a little bit. But it's at least a very exciting chess. All right, number 2, we have the king's pawn opening. So this is one of the most popular moves. And this is a very serious number. The top 2 moves are almost all of the games. And this has been played over 1 million times, and more than 25% of all games that start with e4 see the reply e5. And okay, we'll put a few normal moves on the board. There's other lines. And here there's 3 main moves. For the Scotch, you can go see my video on this opening. For the Italian game, you can watch any beginner breakdown video ever. There's like a 50% chance that they've covered this. Or you can play the Ruy Lopez, which is the most popular. So that's what we're going to take a look at. And all right, it's hard to cover the Ruy Lopez in just a couple minutes. It really deserves a bit more time. So hopefully people request a little bit more of it, because it is an opening I intend to go more thoroughly into in some other videos. All right, a6. Now, it might seem at first like, okay, I put my bishop on b5, so I can take your knight, and then I can take the pawn here on e5. But you'll see that this is not the most common variation. You do not just win a pawn. Here, white should castle or play d3 or knight to c3. But in this position, I know he sees it, but what's black's idea here? Why did he allow this? What does black play? Queen e7. Okay. You do have a little bit better.
D4?
Yeah. Queen d4, a double attack. So, okay, you don't want to lose your knight. So then you'll drop your knight back, and typically we'll get this check. And now this is a funny thing happened here at the club. I don't know, you might have been playing in this tournament, but it was in a knights tournament where white played a great move here, but not very legal. He castled. And okay, the computer won't let me do it, But all right, that happened. It was a game between a 1500 with the white pieces and a 1300 with the black pieces, and nobody noticed till after the game. But yeah, white won quickly, because if you can castle and then put your rook on e1, you win quickly. That would just refute this opening. Instead, you'll get a position more like this. And okay, white doesn't really have any big advantage. You want a little bit more as white. So more typical, let's drop our bishop back. And okay, several moves here for black. The most common, knight f6. And after we castle, we haven't defended our e-pawn. We can pick here as black, do we want an open game or a closed game? Very popular at the high level right now is just to play the open variation. And white will play either rook e1 or more commonly the move d4, and the position will open up. Though historically much more popular is the closed variation, where you don't take the pawn. You instead develop your pieces, and we defend the pawn. Now that the pawn is defended, we are thinking about grabbing this pawn here, taking the knight and then grabbing it. So black kicks the bishop away. Okay, and let's play here. Let's defend our piece. Now that the e-pawn is protected by another pawn, black is thinking about playing the move knight to a5, grabbing the bishop. And if you played the Ruy Lopez a lot, you really love this bishop. So you want to make a little space for him so that if he gets attacked, he can go back here. And even though there's a pawn in the way, sometimes he's very useful in a kingside attack. And okay, here there's a lot of moves, but after h3, now this is where most people are picking which variation they want to go into. So it's interesting to know what you guys might want to see from this position. There's the Zaitsev variation where you put your bishop on the diagonal, puts a lot of pressure on the center. There's the Breyer where the knight will reroute to d7, also very interesting. And the most popular is your knight to a5, followed by a quick c5. This is the Chigorin defense. And it feels, like I don't really want to go too much into the opening here because we simply don't have the time. And out of respect for the opening, we'll wait till we can go a little bit deeper. And the number one most popular response to e4, hopefully a lot of you know it, it's the Sicilian defense. And we've gone over a little bit of this. It's been played over 1.5 million times, and it accounts for 39.5% of all games. So when you play e4, you almost always get the Sicilian. That seems true in my practice. It's very typical. Black's not just trying to equalize, he's actually trying to fight for an advantage here. So that's one way black can control the d4 square. You'll notice e5 and c5 are both fighting against white's immediate plan, which is to put 2 pawns in the center. But we want to still play d4. Let's just get our knight out first. And so many moves here. All these, everything is a move here. But all right, we'll look at d6. It's the most popular. And we're going to see an opening that we've seen very recently. After we take, black gets to say, all right, I traded a side pawn for a central pawn. So a lot of endgames will favor black. White gets to say, I'm going to get a lot more activity, and I'm going to show that I can get an initiative from the beginning and convert that into some sort of advantage in the middle game. And okay, white, if black doesn't do anything, is probably thinking about playing a move like c4. So he stops it by attacking the pawn and getting white to put the knight in front of his c-pawn. Now, what's the most common move in this position? There's a lot of moves here. a6. Yeah, and so we've covered this in my last video, I guess. So we covered this just a couple weeks ago. So this is the most popular. And we went over quite a lot of possible moves here. There's a lot of moves. And we ultimately took a good look at the English attack. So today we'll look at something a little bit different, spice it up, play a much more aggressive move. And this is often thought to be the way black should play, or white should play if he's trying to prove that he can refute the Najdorf. So this leads to some really insane stuff. This is some of the most critical stuff in all of chess. Very exciting positions. We'll take a little look. And white plays the move f4, intending e5. He's just going to do this. So normally, black will stop him. Here there's actually 3 really interesting moves. That's probably untrue. This move is also probably interesting. But okay, the classical way of playing is just to develop your bishop. That way if you play e5, there's no pin. But But there's some crazier stuff. For example, you can play queen to b6, and this also is called the poison pawn variation. You can protect your b pawn, but it's more typical to allow black to take it. And knight to b3 is a move, rook to b1 is a move, and we can't go into all of this, today, but it's very exciting. And white will either play after this move, he'll either play e5 or f5, and like super grandmasters will say it's all been worked out to a draw. But if you watch a lot of these games, they're crazy and wild, and the draw lines are all ridiculous. So it's a lot of fun just to, even if you don't want to play this opening, it's a lot of fun just to look at some of the poison pawn games just out of sheer interest. Okay, it's also possible to play the move b5. This is the Polgaevsky variation. And so wait a minute, you just let me play e5. And all right, what's your big cunning point here? Black will take. You might be thinking maybe you can get away with kicking this bishop away this way. But white gets a pretty decent position. This isn't what we're going to look at, but okay. You can see white has a pretty nice position, and this is known to be pretty good for him. So, all right, that variation is just out. So we'll look at what they really do. First, black takes, white takes, and now there's a tactical justification for black's move here, and that's queen to c7. So if white takes the knight, and he should, the whole point, I hope you can see it at home. Pause your videos if you haven't seen it yet. It's queen to e5, attacking the king and the bishop. Okay, so white should develop his piece. And a very interesting situation has arisen. Now, white has developed all of his pieces. And even the queen is pretty good on the open file. And can black really survive like this? Can he just move his queen around a whole bunch? That's going to be sort of the focus of the game. And since this has been played so often, black has come up with some interesting defensive resources, because white is about to get a huge initiative here. He's going to put his bishop on the open diagonal. Some of these pieces are going to start jumping in here, and it can cause a lot of problems for black. So actually the most common move here is a surprising move, rook to a7. The point is, it's hard for black to ever develop this knight, because if it ever moves, you're giving away control over c6, which is very dangerous. This also doesn't help black's case, because after bishop to f3, we'll just look at this for a second. White has a very strong attack here, and okay, black should be really, really careful. Yeah, we don't want to move the knight and give away control over c6. So instead, rook to a7. And the point is, we're going to go put our bishop on d7, then or rook on d7, then we're going to put our bishop on b7, and we're going to fight against some of white's attacking ideas. And all right, maybe on another day we'll get to cover all this crazy and wild stuff. I mean, it leads to some of the most beautiful games in chess, and historically just some of the greatest games that have ever been played have come in lines like this. Okay. And yeah, we shouldn't forget bishop to e7. Let's see. And we'll just go over one line here really quick. All right, so if you just play normal moves, white can try to attack black, blow him off the board. He'll attack in the center. And after some trades, we kick the knight around, and we get very interesting games. So this also is a very common way to play, and hopefully we get to take a look at it in depth sometime. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the top 10 list. If this is something that you want to see again in the future, let me know. Do you have ideas? Top 10 anything. We could do a top 10 D4, top 10 Sicilians, top 10 anti-Sicilians. What do you guys want to see? Did you like it? I know the handicap is that we don't really get to go in depth in everything that I'd like to do. So it'd just be interesting to see what you guys have to say. And as usual, keep sending in all of your submissions for openings that we might want to do in the future. Hit like, hit share, hit a lot of buttons, and I'll see you guys next week.